Picture a place where the wind doesn't just howl, it screams. A place so cold, the air itself feels dangerous, so dark for months at a time that the sun simply doesn't come back. Now imagine standing in the middle of it, not moving, not eating, not sleeping, just standing in the dark. 40 degrees below zero, wind like a blade, and balanced on your feet, fragile, irreplaceable. One chance. An egg. If it touches the ice for more than a few seconds, it dies. And here's the thing. Nothing forced them here. They chose this. Every year, without fail, generation after generation, they leave the relative safety of the ocean, march deep into the most hostile place on the planet, and they stay there. So before we talk about how they survive, and trust me, it gets stranger, the real question is, why? Why would any living thing willingly come here? The answer is one of the most quietly unsettling things I've ever learned about evolution. And once you understand it, you'll never look at survival the same way again. To understand why they're here, you first have to understand what isn't here. No trees, no shelter, no insects, no scent trails left by something that might kill you in the night. No foxes, no wolves, no land predators at all. Because the cold doesn't just make survival hard, it filters. Life after life after life, eliminated. Sieved out by the sheer brutality of the temperature until almost nothing remains. And what that leaves behind is space and silence. An entire continent, the 5th largest on Earth, with almost nothing living on it. If you're the kind of creature that can pay the price of admission, you have it almost entirely to yourself. But don't mistake that for safety, because the danger didn't vanish, it just moved. Beneath the ice, into the black water below, something is always waiting down there. This isn't a world without threats. It's a world where the rules changed. The emperor penguin didn't stumble into Antarctica. It marched in on purpose. Every year, when winter arrives and the temperatures plunge to their worst, the emperors, the largest of all penguins, leave the ocean, the only place they can feed, and walk inland. Across frozen sea ice, past the last cracks of open water, into the dark interior where nothing else is willing to go. And there, in the most unlivable conditions on the planet, they breed. The female lays a single egg, one chance, no backup. And then comes the moment that still stops me cold every time I think about it. The egg has to move, from her feet to his, a transfer that takes only seconds. But if it touches the ice for too long in those seconds, it freezes. It dies, right there before it ever had a chance. If they succeed, she leaves. She walks back toward the ocean to find food. And the male? He stays. For 2 months, he doesn't eat. He doesn't hunt. He stands in total darkness, holding that egg on his feet beneath a fold of warm skin, while temperatures try, constantly, to take everything from him. This sounds insane, and honestly, it kind of is. But here's the part evolution figured out millions of years before we did. The sea ice in winter becomes stable. It locks into a wide, solid platform far from the open water, and the open water is exactly where the leopard seals and orcas hunt. By going further in, the emperors put distance between themselves and the things that would eat them. They're not suffering out there. They're hiding. The cold is the price. The distance is the point. They didn't evolve to love the dark. They evolved to use it. But not every penguin went that far. Some stopped at the coastline, looked out at the interior, and said, whatever the penguin equivalent of "no thank you" is, and stayed. Gentoo penguins live right at the edge. Exposed rock, gravel, ice-free ground near open water. At first, that sounds easier. It isn't. Because staying close to the ocean means staying close to everything that hunts in it. Leopard seals, orcas, the full cast of creatures that want to eat you. But it also means food, reliable, consistent food. No marching for miles, no 2-month fast in the dark. The Gentoo made a different trade. Less extreme cold, more predator risk, more flexibility, more uncertainty. And the fascinating thing? When conditions shift, when ice forms late, when currents move, when fish disappear, the Gentoo adapts, changes its timing, moves its range. The Emperor can't do that. The Emperor is committed. Two completely different strategies, two completely different risks, same stakes. Then there are the ones who didn't choose ice at all. The Western Rockhopper penguin chose rock. On sub-Antarctic islands near Antarctica, they build their lives on cliffs. Sharp, unstable, beaten by waves so violent they don't so much roll in as explode against the stone. There's no graceful landing here. They fire themselves out of the ocean, slam into the rock face, and scramble. Tiny hooked claws scrabbling to grab hold while the surf tries to drag them back. Miss the jump, catch a bad wave, you're back in the water, and something down there noticed. So why here? Because almost nothing else can. The terrain itself becomes the filter. Steep slopes, narrow ledges, punishing impact. Most creatures, most predators, simply can't follow. The danger doesn't disappear, but it's pushed somewhere else. And in the world of survival, that might be enough. And then there's the strategy that inverts everything we just talked about. No isolation, no empty ice, no lonely cliff. The king penguin chose the crowd. Hundreds of thousands of them, packed together on sub-Antarctic beaches, noise in every direction, bodies pressing against bodies, chaos. And somewhere in that chaos is your chick, the one thing you cannot lose. King penguins, second only to the emperor penguins in size, take over a year to raise a single offspring. During that time, parents have to leave, sometimes for days at a stretch, to find food at sea. When they come back, the colony looks exactly the same as when they left. So how do they find their chick? Not by sight, by voice. One specific call in a sea of hundreds of thousands of identical sounding calls. Their chick knows it. They know their chicks. A connection so precise it cuts through the noise every time. If it fails, if the call doesn't land, the chick starves. The stakes are the same. The environment just looks different. Because here, there's food, rich, reliable ocean currents loaded with prey. The king penguin traded space and quiet and simplicity for a full stomach. Now step back. Look at all of them at once. The emperor, standing alone in the dark, 2 months without food, holding an egg above the ice. The Gentoo, nimble and restless at the coastline, surfing the edge between hunger and danger. The Rockhopper, hurling itself at stone walls, bleeding for a ledge. The king, screaming one specific call into a wall of noise, gambling everything that its chick still remembers the sound. Different worlds, different dangers, different costs. But here's what every single one of them has in common. None of them found a safe place. And that's not an accident. That's the whole story. To understand why penguins ended up here, in places this extreme, you have to understand something about how evolution actually works. Because most people imagine it like a craftsman, patient, intentional, shaping creatures towards some perfect design. But that's not what it is. Evolution is a filter. It doesn't build anything. It just removes what doesn't work. Generation after generation after generation. The ones that couldn't handle it are gone. The ones still standing get to try again. And here's where it gets interesting. Penguins didn't start in Antarctica. Their ancestors were birds, flying birds, living in the ocean regions of the southern hemisphere, probably somewhere far more forgiving than a frozen continent. But birds that hunt underwater face a problem. Wings built for air are bad at water. To fly, you need lightweight, broad surfaces that catch wind. To dive, you need something rigid and narrow that cuts through water without fighting it. You can't optimize for both. So over millions of years, in some ancestral population, birds that were slightly better at swimming started leaving more offspring. Their wings slowly shortened, densified, the feathers changed, losing the airy structure that makes flight possible, becoming instead a tight, waterproof layer, almost like scales. They stopped being able to fly, but they became extraordinary divers. And the moment you're committed to the ocean, truly committed, your whole body shaped around it, the cold waters of the southern hemisphere stop being a barrier. They become a hunting ground. But here's where the story takes a turn, because now these proto-penguins face a new problem. They still have to reproduce on land. And land, unlike the open ocean, is crowded, full of competitors, full of things with teeth and claws, and much better reasons to be on solid ground than a waddling, flightless bird that moves like it forgot how legs work. So what does evolution do? The same thing it always does. It filters. The ones that nested in places where predators couldn't follow. On isolated islands, steep cliffs, frozen coastlines too hostile for most hunters to bother with. Those ones survived. Those ones had chicks. Those chicks inherited the instinct to return to the same brutal places their parents chose. And the ones that tried to nest somewhere comfortable, they became meals. Generation after generation, comfortable got selected out. What remained were the birds willing to pay the most extreme prices for the most extreme protections. That's not poetry, that's just math. Now apply that logic to everything we just talked about. The emperor penguin's 2-month fast in total darkness wasn't designed by anything. At some point, in some ancient population, individuals that wandered further inland to breed, away from the predator-thick coastline, had slightly better survival rates, slightly more chicks. The ones that stayed closer to the water got picked off more often. Over millions of years, further inland became encoded so deeply it looks like a choice. It isn't a choice. It's the echo of every ancestor that survived. The rockhoppers punishing cliffs? Same logic. Birds that nested on accessible ground competed with everything. Birds that found terrain so brutal that it screened out rivals and predators alike? They thrived. The ones that couldn't handle the impact, the surf, the scramble, washed out, literally. The king penguin's deafening colony? Every individual in that crowd is there because its parents survived that crowd, and their parents before them. The ones whose calls weren't distinct enough, whose chicks couldn't recognize them, lost their offspring to starvation. The recognition system didn't appear fully formed. It was sharpened generation by generation by the ones who failed. Every single behavior you see, every quirk, every seemingly irrational decision, it's the residue of millions of years of loss. And that's the thing that stops me every time I think about it. We look at these animals and we see toughness, resilience, the triumph of life in impossible places. But what we're actually looking at is a graveyard. Every perfectly adapted behavior exists because of the countless versions that didn't work. Every species is shaped by the weight of everything evolution threw away to build it. The emperor penguin standing in the dark isn't proof that life finds a way. It's proof of how mercilessly that way was carved. Not with intention, not with a plan. Just with one brutal, patient question asked of every living thing that's ever existed. Can you survive the cost? The ones standing in Antarctica right now? They're the answer. We started in the dark. One shape, one egg, one 40 below night that never seemed to end. And I told you it looked like madness. But here's what I didn't tell you then. That emperor penguin standing on the ice, the one holding that egg in the dark for 2 months without eating, without moving, without any guarantee that any of it will work. He's not the first. He's not even close to the first. That exact behavior in that exact place has been repeated for somewhere between 40 and 60 million years. 40 million years of fathers standing in the dark. 40 million years of eggs balanced above the ice. 40 million years of the wind trying and failing to take everything. Let that number sit for a moment. Because the last common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees didn't exist 40 million years ago. The continent of Antarctica had barely finished freezing over. The world looked almost nothing like it does now. And still, on that ice, something was standing, waiting. Think about what had to happen for that one penguin to exist. Every single ancestor it has going back further than you can actually hold in your mind, survived. Not comfortably, not safely, but enough. Enough to find a mate, enough to lay an egg, enough to make it through one more winter in the dark. Every plague that swept through a colony, every leopard seal that hit the water at the exact right moment, every chick that didn't make it back to its parents' call in time. All of that happened. All of that was real. And this penguin is standing there anyway. Not because it's special, because it's what's left. That's the thing about survival that we almost never let ourselves fully feel. We treat it like an achievement, like something that was earned. But survival doesn't care about effort. It doesn't reward suffering. It doesn't remember the ones that almost made it. It only keeps what works. And when you look at a penguin, really look, past the tuxedo and the waddle and everything that makes them easy to love, what you're actually seeing is 40 million years of things going just barely right. A margin so thin you couldn't slide a feather through it. And on the other side of that margin, silence. All the versions that didn't make it, all the strategies that were almost good enough, all the eggs that touched the ice 1 second too long. Gone. Not remembered, not mourned, just gone. So the next time you see one, waddling across the ice, or hurling itself at a cliff, or screaming into a crowd of thousands, don't feel sorry for it. Don't marvel at how tough it is. Just understand what you're actually looking at. You're looking at the end of an unbroken chain that stretches back further than our species can comprehend. A chain forged not by strength, but by the relentless, pitiless removal of everything that wasn't quite strong enough. It got here the only way anything gets here, by being the last one standing. And out there, in the dark, on a continent most humans will never set foot on, something is standing on the ice, holding an egg, waiting for a sun that won't come back for months. The cold is trying to take it. The wind is trying to take it. Everything about that place is trying to take it. And for 40 million years, it hasn't.